How my daughter made me homeless after I was diagnosed with cancer. Welcome to African Stories by Asada, the Scenic Drivers YouTube channel. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to leave comments, share, like and subscribe so that you will be the first to be notified of our next video coming up. We appreciate your subscription. This is the heartbreaking and powerful story of Daniel, a father living in Minneapolis, who survived cancer only to be betrayed by the daughter he loved the most. After a terrifying battle with throat cancer, Daniel signs over his house to Grace, his only child, in gratitude for taking care of him during his treatment. Grace, influenced by her friend Catherine, a cunning realtor, sells the house and keeps most of the $165,000 profit for herself to start a business. She gives Daniel only $20,000, leaving him homeless and devastated. While Grace lives lavishly and recklessly spends the money, Daniel lives in shelters and cheap motels, stretching every dollar. Redemption comes when Daniel reunites with an old friend, David, who helps him enter real estate. With resilience and faith, Daniel becomes a successful property investor. Meanwhile, Grace's life crumbles. She returns to ask forgiveness. Please leave comments, like, share and subscribe. It started with a small lump on the left side of Daniel's neck. He thought it was nothing, a swollen gland maybe. But weeks passed, and it didn't go away. It didn't hurt, but it grew bigger, hard like a stone under his skin. Then came the voice changes. His deep, calm tone turned rough, dry, scratchy. Friends noticed. "You sound tired," they said. He smiled and brushed it off. But deep down, Daniel felt something was wrong. The lump pressed against his throat when he swallowed. Breathing became heavy. At night, he coughed until tears rolled down his cheeks. Daniel lived alone in Minneapolis. He was strong, had always been. A single father, he raised Grace by himself after his wife passed away when Grace was only 5. Now Grace was grown, smart, beautiful, working from home for a big credit card company. She lived in Chicago but called every day. When the coughing wouldn't stop and fatigue set in like a weight over his shoulders, Daniel finally called his doctor. Tests followed. Then scans. Then that moment no one is ever ready for, "You have cancer," the doctor said quietly. The news knocked the breath out of him. Throat cancer, advanced. But there was a small window of hope. The treatment would be hard, painful, and long. Still, Daniel chose to fight. When he told Grace, she didn't even hesitate. "I'm coming home," she said. She packed up her things, moved into his house, and cared for him between her Zoom calls and reports. She helped him eat when he could barely swallow, cleaned up when he couldn't make it to the bathroom, and held his hand through chemo days. Grace made everything easier. Daniel, weak and often barely able to speak, watched her move through the house with love in her eyes. He thanked God for her every day. On the darkest nights when he felt like giving up, her voice kept him going. "We are going to beat this, Daddy," she would whisper. And slowly, the scans improved. The lump shrank. His voice began to return. His smile came back, faint but true. He began to believe again he could survive this. Then came the big day. "You're cancer-free," the doctor announced. Grace cried. Daniel cried. They held each other for a long time. Life had given him a second chance. Full of gratitude, he told Grace he wanted to sign over the house to her. "You deserve it," he said. "You saved my life." She hugged him tightly and said she didn't need it, but eventually, she agreed. It was the least he could do. It was home, their shared battleground, their miracle. As Daniel regained his strength, he began thinking about downsizing. The house was too big for one person. He wanted a small 2-bedroom townhome near the park. Grace agreed and called her old friend Catherine, a sharp, well-connected realtor. Catherine came by that weekend with papers and ideas. She walked through the house in heels and a pencil skirt, praising the layout, the natural light. "We can get you top dollar," she said confidently. "Just a few repairs, a bit of staging." Daniel nodded while Grace followed Catherine around, notebook in hand. The next 2 weeks were busy. Painters came in, a handyman fixed the door frames, and Catherine brought in furniture for staging. The house looked perfect. Daniel felt proud. It wasn't just a building anymore, it was a symbol of survival. Catherine listed it on the market, and within 4 days, the offers came pouring in. One stood out, way above asking price. Excited, Grace danced in the kitchen. "This is it, Daddy. We did it." Catherine popped open a bottle of wine and toasted to miracles and money. Daniel smiled, though quietly. All he wanted was enough to buy his modest townhome and give Grace a little something extra as thanks. "Whatever is left after the down payment, we'll split," he said. Grace nodded and kissed his cheek. He trusted her with everything. The house sold for an incredible profit, $165,000 over Daniel's original purchase price. After expenses, the profit remained strong. Catherine handled all the closing documents, and since the house was in Grace's name, everything went through her. Daniel didn't worry. She was his daughter. She had slept beside him when he was too sick to lift his head. She had brought him back from the edge of death. He never imagined what would come next. Daniel picked out a townhome he liked, simple, clean, near the community center. He called Grace to let her know. "Perfect," she said. But weeks passed. The down payment never came. Confused, he asked again. Then the call came. Grace explained she needed most of the money. Catherine had encouraged her. "This is your chance," she told Grace. "Start that business you've always dreamed of. Your dad is fine now. He's going to be okay." And Grace, his sweet girl, believed her. Daniel sat quietly as Grace handed him a check. It was for $20,000. He looked at it, confused. "What's this?" he asked gently. Grace smiled nervously and said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I really need this money more than you do right now. I'm starting my own business, marketing consulting. Catherine says I have the skills and timing is everything." Daniel blinked, stunned. "But I thought we agreed $50,000 for the townhome, then we share the rest." Grace's smile faded. "I know, Daddy. But things change. I've sacrificed too, you know." Daniel felt like the air had been sucked from the room. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He stared at the check, his hands trembling. "I thought this was about gratitude," he whispered. Grace looked down. "I am grateful. But I also have dreams. I'm not being selfish. This is just survival for me too." Her words hurt more than the chemo ever did. She kissed his forehead and walked out, leaving Daniel sitting alone with his shock and that small piece of paper. He couldn't sleep for days. His thoughts ran in circles. Had he raised her wrong? Was he blind? Was he just a burden now? Friends who heard his story advised him, "Take the money. It's not what you deserve, but don't let pride starve you. Start over." So Daniel, heart heavy, deposited the $20,000. But something inside him had cracked, something deep. He had faced cancer and lived. Now he faced betrayal by the one person he trusted most. Grace moved into a luxury condo downtown. New clothes, new office furniture, brand photo shoots. Her Instagram exploded with quotes like "Boss Lady Energy" and "Make Your Own Magic." Daniel watched from his motel room, lying on a thin mattress with a flickering lamp and stale air. He tried not to feel bitter. "She's young," he whispered. "She'll learn." But at night, his chest ached, not from illness this time, but from disappointment so heavy, it pressed down on his soul. Grace kept her distance. She called once in a while, said she was busy building. Daniel, now living in cheap weekly motels, started writing again, poems, reflections, letters he never sent. He stayed quiet about his pain. At shelters and church meals, he made friends with others who had lost everything. He learned how to stretch meals, how to live with less, how to smile even when broken. "I beat cancer," he told himself. "I can survive this too." Daniel applied for odd jobs, mostly handyman work. He cleaned apartments, fixed toilets, and painted walls. No one knew he once owned a beautiful home in the suburbs. No one knew he gave it away. On Sundays, he sat on a park bench feeding birds, watching children laugh, trying to remember the last time he felt that kind of joy. The money Grace gave him slowly drained, he used it carefully, never wasted a dime. Grace, on the other hand, flew to Atlanta for a branding summit. She shared panels with influencers, bragged about building a six-figure business. She posted selfies beside rented Lamborghinis and high-rise windows. But behind the smiles, the reality was messier. The marketing firm wasn't taking off as she hoped. Bills piled up. She invested in a crypto scheme Catherine introduced her to, and lost $25,000 overnight. Still, her pride wouldn't let her stop. Daniel saw her on the news once, being interviewed about young black entrepreneurship. He smiled, proud and hurt at once. "That's my daughter," he whispered to a stranger at the shelter. "She took care of me when I was sick." He didn't tell the rest of the story. He couldn't. Some pains are too sharp to say out loud. He spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering why. Not just why she did it, but why he didn't see it coming. Why the love he gave wasn't enough to make her do right by him. He had nothing left of the house except memories: Grace's first birthday party in the living room, their late-night talks during the storm blackout, the dance they had when her college acceptance letter came. All gone now, like smoke in winter air. One afternoon, he stood outside the townhome he once wanted. It had been sold to another buyer. A young couple now lived there with a child who giggled on the porch. Daniel didn't cry. He simply nodded, as if saying goodbye to a dream that had never really been his. He turned and walked back toward the bus stop, wind pressing against his coat, heart heavier than the day the doctor said, "Cancer." This pain, this betrayal, it was worse. Grace rented a modern loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that overlooked the city skyline. She decorated it with velvet chairs, gold-trimmed mirrors, and plants she barely watered. Her Instagram was a gallery of perfection. "Soft life," she captioned a post with champagne in hand. Meanwhile, Daniel stood in line at a shelter, holding a tray of watery soup and stale bread. Nights were cold in the shared dormitory. He slept beside strangers who snored and sobbed in their dreams. Every dollar Daniel spent was planned. A cup of coffee became a luxury. He skipped meals to stretch his money. He learned which church served hot breakfast, which streets were safest to sleep on when shelters were full. He didn't beg. He didn't complain. But some nights, when the wind howled through cracks in the motel window, he closed his eyes and whispered, "God, what did I do wrong?" Grace attended networking events and pitch meetings. She wore custom suits and carried a tablet full of brand ideas. Catherine, her realtor friend, often joined her, whispering, "You're too smart to be small. Think big." Grace did. She invested in a friend's beauty line, bought ad space on podcasts, hired a personal assistant. But none of the money was coming back. Still, she kept pretending. Pretending success. Pretending peace. Pretending she didn't miss her father. Daniel worked part-time with a janitorial company. He cleaned office floors at night, pushing a mop while others slept. His back ached. His knees swelled. But he never missed a shift. His motel room smelled like bleach and tired dreams. On the wall, he taped a note, "One day at a time." He counted every penny, still holding on to a sliver of the $20,000. A tiny piece of hope tucked deep in his wallet. Grace started to struggle. Her business account was nearly empty. Credit card bills piled up. The furniture she bought on pay-later plans came with threats of repossession. Catherine began to distance herself. "It's just business," she said. Grace begged her for guidance, for help, for anything, but Catherine had moved on to new clients. Grace's dream was unraveling. The money she built her empire on was gone. And the guilt she buried began to surface. Daniel met kind people in the shelter system. An elderly woman named Ruth always saved him a seat during dinner. A teenager named Jamal shared his charger. He found strange comfort in these broken souls. They didn't judge him, didn't ask about the past. With them, Daniel didn't have to explain how a man with a paid-off house and a loving daughter ended up with nothing. They saw his pain without needing the story. Grace avoided her father's calls. Every ring reminded her of what she took. She told herself he was fine, that he'd move on. He's strong, she whispered. He survived cancer. But one night, drunk of cheap wine and tears, she called his old number. It was disconnected. Her heart sank. She stared at the ceiling, haunted by a single question: what if he's not okay? Daniel spent Sundays at the public library, reading real estate books and writing plans in old notebooks. I won't die like this, he told himself. I will rise. Each chapter he read lit a new fire. He watched free webinars, studied zoning laws, learned how investors bought buildings with little or no money. The dream wasn't dead. Just buried under grief and dust. Grace tried to revive her business. She offered discounts, ran ads, made TikToks. But the buzz was gone. No one was listening. She sold her couch. Then her laptop. She cancelled subscriptions, ate noodles for days. The fear clawed at her. Was this her karma? Was this what her father felt when she turned her back? Her beauty, her ambition, her boldness, they couldn't save her now. Daniel saved $6,000 from small gigs and careful living. It wasn't much, but it was sacred. It was proof that even broken men could rebuild. One night, at a bus stop in North Minneapolis, he prayed quietly, God, just give me one door to walk through. I do the rest. He didn't know the answer was already on the way, in the form of an old friend he hadn't seen in over a decade. Grace faced eviction. Her landlord taped a pink notice to her door. She ripped it off with trembling hands. The condo that once held champagne nights and fake smiles now echoed with silence and regret. She thought of calling Catherine but remembered the cold goodbye. You're on your own now, Catherine had said. Grace sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, whispering, Daddy. I'm sorry. Daniel was mopping the floor of a downtown rental when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Daniel. Daniel Okafor. He turned. It was David Namdi, an old church friend, now a successful real estate broker. David stared, stunned. Man, what happened to you? Daniel hesitated, then simply said, life. David didn't ask more. He just opened his arms. Come stay with me. David gave Daniel a clean room, warm food, and a second chance. I help you, my brother, he said. You're not done yet. They talked late into the night about God, betrayal, business, and purpose. David saw fire still burning in Daniel's eyes. You don't need millions. You need knowledge, he said. He offered Daniel a role managing his rental units. Daniel took it with both hands. David mentored Daniel every day. He taught him how to analyze deals, negotiate leases, and manage tenants. Daniel soaked up every lesson. This is your comeback, David said. Daniel used what was left of his $20,000 to put a down payment on a small fourplex in a rough neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was his. The keys felt like gold in his hands. Daniel cleaned the place himself. Painted walls. Fixed pipes. He rented out 3 units and lived in the 4th. Rent covered the mortgage. He was no longer homeless. He was a landlord. A man rebuilding brick by brick, dignity by dignity. He didn't post it online. He didn't tell Grace. He just prayed and walked and smiled quietly in the mirror again. Grace, now sleeping on a friend's couch, heard whispers of Daniel's success through a mutual contact. Your dad's doing real well, someone said. Owns a few buildings now. Her stomach flipped. She didn't believe it. How could the man she left in a motel become an investor? But curiosity grew. So did shame. She hadn't called him in almost a year. She found his number through an old email. Hands shaking, she called. He answered after 3 rings. Hello. That voice, still deep, still calm, made her cry instantly. "Daddy," she whispered. Silence. Then, "Grace." Her tears poured. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I lost everything." Daniel didn't speak for a while. When he did, his voice cracked. "I forgave you a long time ago." Grace asked to see him. He agreed, reluctantly. When she arrived at his fourplex, she was shocked. It was clean, quiet, beautiful. Daniel stood at the door, older, stronger, more peaceful. She dropped to her knees. "I didn't come for money," she said. "I just came to say I was wrong." He helped her up. "I know," he said softly. He gave her a sealed envelope. Inside was a check for $15,000. "Take it," he said. "Start over. But don't come back." Grace shook her head, crying. "Daddy, please." He looked away. "I love you. But love doesn't always mean we stay connected. You broke something in me, Grace. I'm healing, but I need distance." She understood. For the first time in her life, she truly understood. As she walked away from the fourplex, money in hand, tears in her eyes, Grace felt both shame and grace. Her father had risen from ashes, and gave her mercy she didn't deserve. Daniel watched from the window, whispering, "This time, I'm choosing me." Behind him, the home he rebuilt stood firm. Ahead of him, peace finally waited. Daniel stood in the courtyard of his fourplex one quiet morning, watching the sunrise. He held a cup of tea and breathed in the cool air. Tenants greeted him with respect. Bills were paid. Repairs were scheduled. For the first time in years, his life was calm. David visited often, proud of the man Daniel had become. "You turned pain into power," David said. Daniel smiled. "No," he replied softly, "God did. I just stopped giving up." With David's continued guidance, Daniel bought another property, this time a duplex across the river. He negotiated like a pro, using creative financing and hard-earned savings. The seller shook his hand and said, "You're a sharp one." Daniel chuckled. If only he knew. Each success built his confidence. He wasn't just surviving now, he was building a legacy. A legacy he once wanted to leave to Grace. But now, he built it for himself. Grace, on the other hand, was falling apart. The $15,000 her father gave didn't last. She tried to revive her business again, but her name had faded from the circles she once dazzled. She called Catherine, her old friend, her cheerleader. But Catherine barely answered. When she finally did, her tone was sharp. "Grace, I'm not your bank. I gave you advice. You made your choices." Grace felt like ice cracked under her feet. Grace begged. "Please, Catherine. I have nothing. I made mistakes. Help me find a place, a job, anything." Catherine sighed. "You're toxic to my brand now." "I'm sorry, Grace. I don't have time for your guilt trip." The line went dead. Grace stared at her phone in disbelief. The woman who once told her to chase her dream had vanished when the dream collapsed. That night, she cried harder than she had in years. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his home office going over his rental income sheets. The numbers made him smile. He remembered the motel nights, the silence, the betrayal, and how all of it became fuel. He wrote a note in his journal, "Suffering builds character. Betrayal opens eyes. But healing is my choice." The more he grew, the less he hated. Forgiveness had set him free. Distance had saved his soul. Grace found herself sleeping in her car again. Every time she passed a nice home, she thought of the house she once called hers, the one she sold without giving her father a fair share. She remembered his coughing fits, the way he held her hand during chemo, the whispered "thank you" as he signed the deed to her. She had let greed drown love. And now, she was the one drowning. Daniel started speaking at recovery meetings, not about drugs, but about financial rebirth, betrayal, and redemption. His story touched people. He became a symbol of what it means to fall and rise again. People asked him, "How did you forgive her?" He would always say, "Because holding on was killing me more than the cancer ever did." Grace stood outside his fourplex one afternoon, just looking. She didn't knock. She couldn't. Through the window, she saw him, talking to a tenant, laughing with a neighbor's child. He looked peaceful. She turned and walked away, empty-handed but full of memories. She finally accepted that some doors close forever, not out of hate, but out of healing. Daniel later found a letter on his doorstep. It was from Grace. Inside were no pleas, no requests, just a heartfelt apology. "I lost more than money, Daddy. I lost your trust. I don't expect to get it back, but I hope you live the life you deserve." Daniel read it twice, tears quietly falling. He folded the letter and placed it in his journal. That night, Daniel sat on his balcony, looking at the stars. He thought about the lump in his throat that almost killed him, the betrayal that broke him, and the journey that rebuilt him. He whispered, "Thank you, God, for every dark night. They brought me to this peace." He didn't hate Grace. He didn't wish her harm. He just finally chose himself, and that choice saved his life. Grace spent her nights thinking of ways to reach her father. She missed his voice, his warmth, his steady presence. The pride that once stopped her from apologizing was gone. Now, all that remained was sorrow. She searched his name online. What she found surprised her: articles praising his real estate work, photos of him speaking at community events, testimonials from tenants calling him a man of integrity. She smiled through tears. He made it. She decided to visit. Not for money. Not for sympathy. Just to say, "I see you now." She wore her best outfit, even though it was old. She didn't want to look like the broken woman she'd become. She wanted him to see her with dignity, even if she didn't feel it. At his building, she stood at the door, heart racing, unsure if she should knock. But she did. Daniel opened the door slowly. When he saw her, he didn't speak. His eyes scanned her face, older, thinner, but familiar. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. He nodded. "Come in." Inside, she noticed the home was clean, modest, warm. Photos of family, books on the table, a half-eaten sandwich on the counter. It felt like peace. She sat, awkward, fidgeting. "I heard about everything. I'm proud of you," she said. Her voice cracked. "I'm also sorry." Daniel looked at her for a long time before replying. "I never stopped loving you, Grace. But love without respect is hollow." She cried. "I know. I was foolish. I let greed speak louder than love." He nodded. "You did." The silence between them was thick. "I don't expect anything," she added quickly. "I just wanted you to know. I'm not proud of what I did. I lost everything." Daniel stood and walked into his room. When he returned, he held an envelope. "Inside is $10,000, he said. "It's not for business. It's not a reward. It's a goodbye gift. Use it to survive, to grow. But don't come back." Grace froze. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "I forgave you a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't always mean restoration. You crossed a line that love can't undo." She held the envelope like it was on fire. "You'd rather help me disappear than hold me close again?" she asked through tears. Daniel's eyes softened. "I gave you everything once, my home, my trust, my future. You turned it into an opportunity. That was your right. But now, this is mine. My peace is too valuable. I won't trade it, not even for you." Grace stood, weak in the knees. "I understand," she whispered. "And I don't blame you. I wouldn't take me back either." Daniel walked her to the door. Before she left, he held her hand gently. "Don't waste this," he said. "Not the money. Not the pain. Let it make you better, not bitter." She nodded and walked into the cool evening, sobbing quietly with each step. Daniel closed the door, leaned against it, and wept, not because he hated her, but because he still loved her. But love had taught him boundaries. He lit a candle and sat in silence. The ache would always be there, like an old scar. But scars remind you that healing happened. He opened his journal and wrote, "I am whole now, not because she returned, but because I learned to stay standing when she didn't." Grace used the $10,000 to rent a studio apartment and start working again. This time, there were no shortcuts, no schemes. Just slow, honest steps. She often passed her father's buildings but never approached again. She respected his silence. In her own way, she started healing too, one painful truth at a time. Years later, Daniel stood before a group of young men in recovery, sharing his journey. "Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the deepest," he said. "But you can still rise. You can rebuild. You can choose peace, even if it means walking alone." The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then more. Daniel smiled, not with pride, but with peace. He had lost his house. He had lost his daughter. But he had found himself. Moral lessons. Gratitude should never be taken for granted. Those who helped us in our weakest moments deserve our loyalty. Money can reveal character. What we do with sudden wealth defines who we are. Betrayal by loved ones can hurt more than any illness, but forgiveness frees the soul. It is never too late to rebuild your life, no matter how deep you fall. Real peace sometimes means choosing distance, even from those we love. Influence from toxic friends can destroy family bonds. Choose your advisors wisely. True healing includes setting boundaries with people who have hurt us. Love is not always enough. Trust and respect must walk with it. Hardship can be the soil for greatness if you don't give up. Success built on selfishness never lasts, but grace and humility endure. Thanks for watching. We encourage you to leave comments, share, like and subscribe so that you will be the first to be notified of our next video coming up.